Bhuta praja duruvuranga seshvara Arakshamana sharanam sadashivam. Gentlemen? Vishar Parusa Parushayam Aprati. Vishuparyado Visarpad Utsarpada Sayamaprati. Arakshamana Saranam Sadashivam. Ladies? Visharpad Utsarpada Sayamaprati. Vita Praja Dudruvanga Seshvara Arakshamana Saranam Sadashivam. Tat, that, Ugra Vegam, very fierce and potent poison. Dishi, in all directions. Upari, upward. Adha, downward. Visarpat, curling. Utsarpat, going upward. Asyam, unbearable. Aprati, uncontrollable. Bita, being very much afraid. Braja, apologies, Praja, the residents of all the worlds. Dudruvu, moved here and there. Anga, O Maharaj Parikshit. Sa Ishvara, with the Supreme Lord. Arakshamana, not being protected. Sharanam, shelter. Shada Shivam, unto the lotus feet of Lord Shiva. Translation. O King, when that I'll read it first and then you can repeat after me. O King, when that uncontrollable poison was forcefully spreading up and down in they sought shelter of him. Repeat after me. O King, when that uncontrollable poison was forcefully spreading up and down in all directions, all the demigods, along with the Lord himself, very much afraid. They sought shelter of him. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Purport. One may question Shiva, instead of intervening himself. In this connection, Srila Madhvacharya warns, Rudrasya yasaso hritaya svayam Vishnu visham vibhu na sanjare samatopi vayum choche prashantaye. Lord Vishnu was competent to rectify the situation, but in order to give credit to Lord Shiva, who later drank all the poison and kept it in his neck, Lord Vishnu did not take action. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyanangana Shalakaya Chakshura Militam Dena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Hare Krishna. I just want to briefly touch on the purport to text 12. And that purport I'll quickly read again. To balance Mandara Mountain while it was being pulled from both sides, the Lord appeared on its summit like another great mountain. Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva and King Indra then expanded themselves and showered flowers on the Lord. So when I read this, the Lord appearing on the summit of the mountain like another great mountain, even more powerful because he was actually able to balance that mountain on top of Ajita or Kurma, it reminded me of the ever-expanding capabilities and characteristics of Krishna. And there's that wonderful verse that states that even if we could count the atoms in a universe, we could never count the wonderful qualities and characteristics of Krishna. It's impossible. And Seshanaga, with his thousands of mouths, he still cannot chant all the glories of the Lord. And it reminded me of a class Jananivas gave recently. Oh, no, actually, I think it was Pankajangri Prabhu. And they were talking about when you meditate or when you see the Lord, when you just focus even on the earrings of the Lord, you become so absorbed in that you can't see anything else. So how wonderful that just the earring of the Lord will totally absorb you, that you cannot focus on anything else. And it reminded me of another thing that I'd read recently in second canto. I'm rereading the Bhagavatams and I'm on second canto now, and it's absolutely wonderful. And it refers to Krishna as Aptakam, one who can fulfill his own desires. He can fulfill his desires by himself. So he actually has no need of anything else. And another thing that I read that really struck me and related to this verse, that Krishna's happiness is ever expanding. And Prabhupada gives a very wonderful purport in there. And if you're interested in looking at it later, it's Canto 2, Chapter 6, verse 36. And Prabhupada describes the ever-increasing happiness of Krishna. He says that there's an eternal competition between increment and measurement. So Krishna's happiness is ever expanding. He's happier and happier and more blissful and more blissful. And then he decides to measure it. So he measures it. And then, of course, the ever-increasing happiness goes, no, I'm not going to be measured. So it becomes more and more happy. And then once again, there's the measurement. So this constant competition between increment and then measurement, which I thought was a very wonderful explanation that Prabhupada gave. So, and that's, Prabhupada likens that spiritual happiness to Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam, ever-increasing happess there in competition. So let's now continue. So I'll go back to that purport. And it's very interesting actually, because we're now diving into the pastimes of Lord Shiva and all of his glories. And for someone who perhaps because even Lord Vishnu goes to offer prayers. But in the purport, Prabhupada gives this very nice thing. But the Lord Vishnu was competent to rectify the situation, but in order to give credit to Lord Shiva, who later drank all the poison and kept it in his neck, Lord Vishnu did not take action. Because Krishna in his expansions, he likes to give credit to his devotees. So before I talk about that a little bit further, I'd just like to say how important it is that we read in association of devotees. It's something that we have to do. It's one of the rules that we regularly hear Srimad Bhagavatam, but it's something that we should want to do. Because when we read in association, we take encouragement. Just like Prabhupada said, whoever you associate with, you will become like that person. So we have to be very careful of whom we associate with and how we're associating with them, because it's a very, delicate situation. So when we read together Srimad Bhagavatam, it's just by that potency generated by like-minded souls hearing the glories, we have an opportunity to ask questions, and we have an opportunity to share realizations with each other. Excuse me. And I'm a really big fan of reading groups. And we've got a couple of reading groups in Yugovardhan, which is a temple that I attend in Australia. And here in Mayapur Dham, I think that there are some reading groups going on. I know I have a small reading group with two of my neighbours, and we read a couple of times, meet a couple of the Vaishnavas, the gentlemen here have reading groups, but I'd highly recommend that you do that, because it really helps you absorb. Even though Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's birthplace, we're here all together. We're here in Mayapur Chandra. Wanted the whole world to be attracted to Mayapur. So we're here basking in the shadow of the rising beacon of the TOVP. So how fortunate we are that we have this opportunity to take advantage of all the good things that are in the Dham. Of course, the Dham is only full of good things, but unfortunately, our conditioned nature, we sometimes see negatives. Oh, there's too many pilgrims. Oh, I'm sick of getting my, off of my obeisances and someone kicks me in the head, which is always a very good sign of how you're advancing in Krishna consciousness. And I know that I am very unadvanced, because when someone treads on my head, I kind of go, So it's a very, very special situation that is chanting and association and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. And I came across a very interesting sloka during my reading of second canto. It's 284, if anyone wants to look it up. Srinvata shadaya nityam, grinatascha svachestitam, kalena natidirgena, bhagavan vishate ridi. Persons who hear Srimad Bhagavatam regularly and are always taking the matter seriously will have the Supreme Personality, Sri Krishna, manifested in their hearts within a short time. So to me that key phrase is, and are always taking the matter seriously. And of course sometimes in Bhagavatam class it's hard to give full focus and attention, especially when you've been working very hard, you've been up for Mangalati, and now it's a little bit sleepy time. Not that I'm saying anyone is sleeping in the class, but I remember when Srila Prabhupada would visit temples, if you see any of the footage, often we would fall asleep. I myself have been guilty of falling asleep in a class that Srila Prabhupada has given, which was very sad. But of course there's a very wonderful film of devotees in Melbourne circa 1975, and Prabhupada had arrived and they had just opened their second temple in Melbourne. The first one was in Burnett Street, the second one was in Dank Street, which is now existing. Very beautiful heritage home that they converted into a temple. I think it had been a church or something, readying, getting everything prepared for Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada often commented, he'd say, everywhere I go, I smell wet paint. Because, it was always the last minute. I don't know why it was always the last minute, but I think in a way ISKCON flourishes on the last minute. Last minute, endeavours. So, focus and attention is very important. In association of devotees when we're hearing. And in 5th Canto, chapter 13, verse 21, in the purport, Prabhupada writes, only in association are the law books for the next 10,000 years. So if we just take that little bit of association with Srila Prabhupada through his books, then our resolve, our determination, our realizations, and our spiritual happiness will only increase. So in these amazing pages, we're not only associating with Krishna's pastimes, we're associating with Srila Prabhupada. And as you know, Prabhupada said, I did not write these books. Krishna wrote these books. So it's a win-win. We've got Krishna and we've got Srila Prabhupada. So it's very, very important. And it's very easy to fall out of the habit of reading regularly. I myself had fallen out of the habit for, quite some time due to pressures of work or whatever. But by the inspiration of my family, who are very focused on reading, it's inspired me. So if you've fallen out of the habit, initially it can be very excruciating. It's the last thing you want to do. That's my Bhagavatam reading time. And then you get the juice. And it's really good. What you read, write down. Keep a notebook. That's what I think is taking the matter seriously. You write points down as you're reading. Because our memories are pretty faulty, and if they're like mine, they're hopeless. So you write it down, and then I always repeat what I've read, that special little nugget, that special gem, I repeat to someone. And even though they may think, oh my God, she's just showing off, I always say, no, I'm just repeating to you because that way I can remember it. So that's also a really good habit to do. And the very best thing to do is never fall out of the habit of reading. And I know we have many scholars and pundits here who I can tell by the questions and by what they speak, they're very, focused on reading Prabhupada's books. So best thing. So, and I mentioned this in a class that we had a while ago as a comment, and this is 2.9.24, and this is also one of my favourites. An easygoing life and perfection in transcendental self-realization cannot go together. So we need to perform a little austerity. So we can see through these verses that anything worth achieving takes patience and endeavour. So the demigods and the demons, they're natural enemies. No way are they going to work together. Absolutely not. But they want to achieve that goal. Just, be friends for a while. I'm still on your side, but it's going to happen. So it's very important that we get the understanding that getting that nectar is not easy. And in our own spiritual life, sometimes it can feel like there's not much nectar there. If you're very fortunate, you will be in a very happy state of mind. Sometimes it can be a struggle, but the important thing is you just keep on endeavouring and you keep on trying. And when you have that association, that good association, then you bolster each other up. Someone's riding the bike and the other person jumps on, and then you go ahead very nicely. So stick close to each other. Become very sticky, as they say in IT these days. So even the demigods had to work together, and then all kinds of frightening things came out. We had the snakes, we had the Timangilla fish, we had all other kinds of terrible water elephants. I'm not quite sure what elephants are. Hippopotamus maybe? I don't know. Maybe it's something that's not around right now. And of course, coming from Australia, I can tell you all about snakes. Australia has about 80% of the most poisonous creatures in the world. Snakes everywhere. And at our temple at New Govardhan, it was very interesting in the very early days. It was where the actual temple is located, it was called Snake Hill. Because there's just hundreds of snakes. And I'm not talking about your little green snakes. I'm talking about your king browns, no cobras. Cobras are just for India. But you've got your black snakes and your brown snakes. And if they bite you, you've got, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes if you're lucky. Unless, of course, you lie very still and then you call the ambulance. Most devotees will always keep their mobile phone with me. And we have one devotee called George in New Govardhan. He's the snake shaman. And he actually used to bodyguard Srila Prabhupada in Melbourne. And he, I think in a year, he might rescue 10,000 poisonous snakes. Of course, very unusually, you can't kill those snakes. It's illegal to kill the browns or the blacks. You're meant to just catch them and relocate them. So it's quite unusual. And when I first moved to New Govardhan about 5 years ago, I was becoming adjusted to snakes. Of course, I lived in Mayapur for a long time in the early days, but didn't really run into many snakes. Scorpions we'd run into, unfortunately. Scorpion crawling out of my son's little toy box. That wasn't a very happy thing to see. He was only sleeping about 2 foot away, so that was quite frightening. But when I first moved up to New Govardhan, and I was in the Goshala to, groom the cows for a little bit, and I was talking to my godbrother Venugopal, who's the cow minister for Australia, and who serves the cows very nicely there. Now he is terminally ill, so I request you all again to pray for Venugopal. And he said, "Oh yes, we've got lots of snakes around here, Krishna Rupa." I said, "Oh really? Yeah." He said, "Yeah. Do you want to meet our one that lives in the Goshala?" I went, "Yeah, sure." He said, "Yeah, it's a really big python." He said, "It's about 6 inches from your head." And they turned around and there was a shelf, and there's, I forget this, they gave the snake a name, and there's this big python right there about that far from my head. Needless to say, I jumped very far away. So there's all these frightening things that came out in the ocean of nectar as they were trying to get, the ocean of milk as they were trying to get the ocean of nectar. So I started, we're basically churning that very dusty room. We're churning our very dirty little hearts, or at least my dirty little heart that I churn. So as you're cleaning a room, Prabhupada gives this wonderful example. You're sweeping the room. It's a very simple example, but very pertinent. And the room looks pretty clean to you. It looks okay. And when you start sweeping it, it's Gundicha Marjana Day, and you decide you're going to give your house a good clean after you've cleaned the temple. So you're sweeping away, and there's dust everywhere. It looks like a dust storm. And it's like that in our hearts. When we first start chanting the holy name, we get an immediate bliss. We get an immediate relief from all our material suffering. But then after a while, because we're in the process of cleansing, anarthas are already there, but the anarthas start showing themselves. So our lust, our anger, our greed, our envy, all of these things start coming to the fore. And you'll often find very new devotees might come up to you and say, "Hey, what gives with this? Chanting was fine initially. I'm chanting very nicely, and all of a sudden, all these characteristics that are coming out in my personality that I never had before. I never knew that I was so greedy. I never knew I was so envious. I'm so jealous of that person. I'm so jealous of their service. I'm so jealous of the accolades that they're getting." And it's, they have to be placated. But it's okay. The main thing is you identify what these faults are. And if we don't identify what the faults are, then they take firm grip in the heart. And before you know it, the envy and the lust and the greed and the anger, they take firm hold. And it's this huge battle between your chanting of very fast-growing grass that you have to mow every week, practically, in the summer. And a lot of weeds grow. So I started to decide, okay, I'm going to try and get out some of the weeds. And because I'm a really terrible gardener, I have no idea what's weed, what's plant. I can kind of detect what's grass. But anyway, I'm digging out the weeds and I'm starting to think, actually, it's like that when you're chanting. Is that a weed or is that the Bhakti Lata Bij? Is that my Bhakti Lata? Is that the plant growing? So you have to learn discernment. And of course there's competition in the spiritual world. You know, we want to increase in our service, but we want to encourage other devotees increasing in their service. And have you ever experienced that situation where someone says to you, oh, such and such das or such and such devi dasi, they're such a nice devotee, they do this. And then you find yourself either thinking or saying, yes, but. Have you ever done that? Has anyone done that? I've done that. You go, oh yes. Someone will go, oh, so-and-so is such a nice devotee. They do so much service. And then you go, oh yes, they're really, really nice. But I find they are a little proud. Or I find that they watch a lot of movies. Or I saw them at the cinema. What were you doing at the cinema? No, I was just walking past the cinema. So all of these things, we have to be we have to self-examine. Be constantly looking at yourself. You know, all those little things, and you catch yourself. Unfortunately, in Kali Yuga, you don't get a reaction for what you think. Of course, that doesn't mean that you just go ahead thinking whatever you want to think. Oh, it's okay. Kali Yuga, I won't get a sinful reaction for it. As we know by Bhagavad Gita, unfortunately, thinking, feeling, and willing. So if we think something too much, then we'll will it, and then Bob's your uncle, as you say. You're in trouble. So it's very important to self-examine, to encourage each other, and try and rip out these anartas in the heart. Just like all of the ugly stuff was coming out, the scary stuff was coming out from the ocean of nectar, milk ocean, so we should also be aware. We've got the shark of unconscious, unconstructive criticism. We're all guilty of that. We've got the crocodile of content, and we've got the snake of envy. And envy is a particularly destructive element, because that's why we're here. We read, we hear Prabhupada tell us, we're here in this material world because of our envy, that we wanted to be the centre. So Prabhupada likens that to matsara. Matsara is the word for envy. And Prabhupada says we should become near matsara. We should become non-envious. And even the demigods fall victim to envy. Look at Lord Indra. Always worried, oh, there's some tapasvi who's performing great austerities and he's going to take my position. Oh no, let me go down and tempt him. Let me send some apsaras. I have to shake his resolve in his meditation. So even the demigods, they're worried and they feel very envious. And Prabhupada says that in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, he says that Bhagavatam is meant for those who are non-envious, who are nimaratsara. In other words, one who is not free from the contamination of envy cannot advance in Krishna consciousness. So we need to take a really firm grip of that anatta. Where did they get money? They must be stealing the money. No proof, of course, no evidence, merely empty words. And that goes on all the time in our movement. This very, very nasty and very debilitating and a huge obstacle in our spiritual life is envy. So if we can all focus on the envy aspect, then of envy. in Madhya-lila 4:21, he says, "This is a character of a Vaishnava. He's never envious, who become envious to see someone actually recognized by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It is a fact that no one can preach Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message without being powered by the special mercy of the Lord. This is known to every Vaishnava. Yet there are some envious people who cannot tolerate the expansion of this Krishna consciousness movement all over the world. They find fault with the pure devotee preacher and do not praise him for the excellent service he renders in fulfilling Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement." So even someone as wonderful, specially empowered, individual, sent by Krishna, is a subject of envy. So the other part that's very interesting here, where in order to give credit to Lord Shiva, Lord Vishnu could control the whole thing. He was actually monitoring everything. He was the person behind the scenes. But Krishna likes to give credit to his devotees. He says, "Mad bhakta puja byadika," and that's 11:19:21. "Better you worship my devotees." That's what pleases Krishna. So Krishna is very happy when his devotees, like Lord Shiva, of course Lord Shiva is a very special case. He's an expansion of Krishna. Prabhupada, of course, as you know, gives the example. There's the milk and the yogurt. Lord Vishnu is the milk, and the yogurt is Lord Shiva, which is milk transformed. And there's some other wonderful examples where Krishna likes to give credit to his devotees. Can anyone think of one? There's Krishna and Arjuna, yes? Yes, Krishna and Arjuna. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, he said, "They're all dead. I've killed them all. You actually don't have to do anything. But I want you to do it." Ramachandra. Lord Ramachandra had to build a bridge. Of course, they were floating rocks. That was pretty wonderful. But what did Hanuman do? Hanuman just leapt. So once again, Krishna, his form of Lord Ramachandra, gives credit to his devotees. And of course there's, yes. Just fit me to the post there. Yes, there's Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada is the perfect example of this. You know, Krishna said, Prabhupada told us, he said, "Krishna said to me, I want you to go." And I said, no, I don't want to go. And Krishna said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything." But it didn't mean that Srila Prabhupada didn't undergo trials and tribulations. Hands up here who's read Prabhupada Lilamrita. Oh, sorry. Hands up who hasn't read Prabhupada Lilamrita. I'll be seeing you after class, okay? Please, I beseech you, read Prabhupada Lilamrita. When you read Prabhupada Lilamrita, your love for Srila Prabhupada would increase. If your love for Srila Prabhupada increases, your spiritual life will blossom. Because Krishna loves Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada is our founder acharya. Without Srila Prabhupada, we would be lost. None of us would be here. None of us would be chanting, I can assure you. We'd all be down there in the hellfire of material life. And it's only through Srila Prabhupada's mercy that we are here today. And we continue, by Prabhupada's mercy, to continue to serve. So we need to ensure that we connect with Prabhupada. And there's a wonderful course called the ISKCON Disciple Course. Has everyone done the ISKCON Disciple Course? You will get great benefit from that course. It's not just for new Tattva's one of them, Guru Tattva's the other. And if you, I myself did the ISKCON Disciple course here a few years ago. And I have so many devotees who tell me afterwards, my understanding and love for Srila Prabhupada has increased so much since doing that course. And that course, of course, was created by, I think, about 50 very senior devotees over a number of years. So it's very, very well constructed. And please, if you haven't done that course, do it. It's very, very wonderful. And it's a lot of fun. So Srila Prabhupada is that perfect example of the mercy of Krishna wanting to give the glories to his devotee, just like Lord Vishnu is giving Lord Shiva the credit here. And, when you read Lilamrita, there are thousands of them, and they're so absorbing. When you see a Prabhupada disciple, pull them aside. You want to hear, I saw Prabhupada here, or Prabhupada said this. No, they're not going to do that. But we're all falling off the perch, as they say. So many of my God brothers and God sisters have already left our association. So in another 20 years or so, maybe there'll only be 1 or 2 Prabhupada disciples left. So at the risk of, I don't mean to be in any way self-aggrandizing, don't have to ask me, I don't have much to offer. A lot for Srila Prabhupada's mission, and Srila Prabhupada loved them very much. So, I think I've covered pretty much. Oh, I could go on for ages, but it's nearly time, so I won't go on for ages. Is there any corrections, comments, questions? Yes, Prabhu. We need the microphone.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Maji. Could you throw some more light on the fact when you said that when we have envy or any of those anarthas, we generally don't advance. So is there is there a possibility that a person has got those anarthas and he's chanting, so the chanting is dragging that anartha also because he has that anartha, and the pace, and still he can to some extent or from some angle advance also in some ways?
Well, the chanting is not dragging the anarthas. We are not chanting properly. That's why the anarthas are coming with us. And we're not focusing, or we're not identifying, let me say, not focusing, we want to focus on the holy name, but we're not identifying what these anarthas are. Just like I have no idea, is that a weed or is that a good plant? So we have to be very focused on identifying. Not that we're chanting, that's why we don't, and we all do it, that chanting, we're on autopilot. We're just, we're trying to hear. Prabhupada said you just speak out loud, chant out loud, and you hear. And we're trying to do that. But we often go into that auto zone, just like when you're driving, you suddenly realise, oops, I missed the street I was meant to turn at, because you're just on auto. So that's a big struggle in our spiritual life, that we need to be constantly reminding ourselves, hey, did you hear Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, 20 mantras ago? Or did you hear it just that mantra? Because sometimes you can go on, you can chant a whole round, and you suddenly go, did I hear any of that? Because you're thinking about something else, you're in an auto zone. So, and of course, in Manashiksha it describes that of all the anarthas, the most difficult one to remove, surprisingly in some ways, it's not lust, it's not envy even, it's not greed, it's not anger, but it's the desire for fame, pratishta. And it's described that Pratishta is like a Chandala female prostitute with loose clothing and loose hair. And because the space in your heart is clear, because the other anatas have been removed, there's lots of room there for her to dance around and have a... But the unfortunate thing is that you can clear, at a very advanced stage, obviously, you clear those other anatas. You've got that one left, the pratishta, the desire for fame, for glory, etc., etc., which in a way is kind of linked with envy, because when you're envious, you want to be the centre, you want to be the king pin or the queen pin. But then what happens is, because she's got lots of space, she's going more and more crazy, then she starts calling all the other anatas in. So you're back where you started from. So the chanting's not dragging those anatas, we're dragging them with us because of our inattentive chanting. Very nice question, thank you. I hope I answered that okay. Anyone else?
He told me to come, but I didn't want to come, but he said, just you come and write my books and then I'll do the rest. I believe you referred to that in your class.
Yes, and I have heard that. I can't specifically say, which memory or whatever, but I personally heard that when I was here, very common knowledge. And just like here in the room in Mayapur and Prabhupada's rooms here, once again, does everyone go and visit Prabhupada's rooms and chant around? Please go. There's all of Prabhupada's paraphernalia there. And I had the great good fortune to clean Srila Prabhupada's rooms here. That was one of my services. It was very, very wonderful. And you chant very good rounds in that room. You can feel Prabhupada there very closely. But it was at the beginning of 76, or early 77, I think it was 76, and Prabhupada was here for 2 months. And we would have daily darshan with him from 4 o'clock till 7 o'clock. And I was there in this particular time. I was there every day. And Prabhupada held out someone asked Prabhupada, one of my godbrothers said to Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, does a pure devotee see Krishna everywhere? Does he actually see Krishna? And Prabhupada held out his hand, his right hand, and he said, a drop of water in the palm, if there's a drop of water in the palm, the pure devotee will not only see Krishna and outside of the atom. And then he said, and this is very special and it reiterates what Prabhupada told us. He said, for the pure devotee, revelation. So actually, yes, I would put my life on the line for that comment. I don't think there's time now, but I'd be happy to do some other time or after class or something. Any other questions, comments? Yes, Prabhu.
It's a comment on the statement, the question of Ekalavya Prabhu. That it was Srila Prabhupada spoke to Bhavananda that he said, when Krishna asked me to come here, I said, I cannot go and live under the trees like the 6 Goswamis.
It states in the scripture that we cannot understand the Krishna's philosophy by our own endeavor.
Sorry, that we cannot?
We cannot understand the Krishna's philosophy by our own endeavor.
We cannot understand Krishna's philosophy by our own endeavor.
Means
yes.
That if we will not understand, how can I understand this?
You explain that.
If he did not come to this class, how could he understand the philosophy?
Well, yes, say you're not able to attend a temple, say you live far away, and you have Srila Prabhupada's books, that is sufficient. But at some point in time, you will be so fired up that you will have to have the association of devotees. One devotee who ended up getting first and second initiation, and I was working for the BBT at that stage, taking book orders and things. This is in Australia many decades ago. And there was this one man who every week would order a new book. Like he would, every week he was just getting book upon book upon book. And I would, because I filled the book order and posted the books out to him, I took note. Well, where do you live? And he lived quite some distance from a temple. So I encouraged him, please come and visit. We have a temple in Sydney. Next time you're in the city, please come to the temple. And he started to come to the temple, and he ended up getting, first and second initiation. But that was just buying books on, by mail. He had no shanga. So, of course, Prabhupada's, thank you. Anything else? Yes, Prabhu. Microphone. No, here. At the front.
Haribo. So we were distributing, devotees distributed books, of course, in a park. We were distributing books, and someone had thrown a Back to Godhead in the garbage. And at the time we were in the process of building our temple in Vancouver, but we didn't have any equipment. We had no heavy equipment, and of course we didn't have a lot of funds. And what had happened is this German man, he owned a heavy equipment company. And what had happened was his wife was having an affair with his lawyer. And they tried to kill him. But he survived. He survived. They tried to kill him with an electric shock. And he was so, crestfallen, he went to this park where we distributed Back to Godheads. And he was sitting in the rain. It rains a lot in Vancouver. And he pulled the BTG. He somehow looked in the garbage, and he found the Back to Godhead. And he was sitting in the rain, and he read the entire Back to Godhead. And what happened was, he went to the temple, and he brought all his heavy equipment to the temple: bulldozers, backhoes, excavators, and he helped us build the temple.
Wow.
He never took initiation, but he got lots of mercy. He donated a couple of years of his, free of charge, all his equipment and his energy.
That's wonderful. Wonderful pastime.
A little story about reading Prabhupada's literature.
Well, I'd like to tell you a funny story. It's a bit personal, but because I grew up in an era in ISKCON where women didn't give classes. I joined at the end of 72. So there was a bit of a, ISKCON had undergone a unfortunate paradigm shift, and ladies weren't considered able to give classes. Although Prabhupada, as you know, historically Prabhupada would always encourage women to speak, even in front of him. And so I didn't have that experience of being able to give class, and of course then I spent a lot of my early days here in Mayapur, where Matajis didn't give class. And then of course, in the 2000s, things started to improve, get better, women were giving more classes. But it's always been, a bit of a stumbling block for me. I can talk in public, I don't have that problem. I give workshops and facilitations and all that kind of stuff. But I always feel unqualified, and I am unqualified to speak Bhagavatam. But I had to go down to Melbourne to facilitate a workshop down there for the devotees. And a young girl picked me up at the airport, young brahmacharini, and I was asking how how is everything for the Vaishnavis in the temple? Are they participating okay? Are they giving classes? Are they leading kirtans, etc. like that? What's their level of involvement like? And she said, oh, look, my temple president, he's always encouraged me to give classes, but I just can't do it. And she's a young woman, not an old warhorse like me. And she said, I just can't do it, And I said, yeah, I know exactly how you feel. I feel very uncomfortable when I have to give Bhagavatam. I don't feel like I can say anything. I just feel very awkward. And I just basically finished that sentence. Mentally, I just put the full stop on the end of that sentence, and then my phone rang. We're heading from the airport to the temple, and it was the vice president saying, oh, Krishna Rupa Mataji, can you give Bhagavatam class tomorrow morning? So I just burst out laughing, and I went, I don't know, somehow or other Prabhupada, wants me to give class, so I now have my modus operandi is I'll never volunteer to give a class. I will think of any way of getting out of giving a class, but if I'm asked, then I have to do terminal illness, being rushed to hospital, urgent trips to Calcutta. I couldn't escape the fact. So thank you very much for very patiently and kindly listening to me. Hare Krishna. Glories to Prabhupada. Jai Shri Prabhupada. Haribo.
I was wondering, I understand you're an actor, right? You write?
I'm mostly an editor.
An editor?
Yes.
Okay, I think I sent you an email. My name is Nisingativ Das.
Oh, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I got your email from the forum and I sent you an email because I follow you on Facebook.